Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Kirk Everson, Principal and Government Intelligent Automation Leader at KPMG. Kirk, good to have you.
Thanks for being here.
And our topic is robotic process automation. And let's begin with exactly what it is, because sometimes the artificial intelligence people describe their thing and it sounds like RPA. Sometimes the RPA describe things and it sounds like AI. So let's sort that out, exactly what RPA is.
That's a really good question. I think it's important to level set to understand the technology spectrum that's out there with intelligent automation and artificial intelligence. You kind of have to look at it, I'll call it in three different buckets, where robotics process automation is in that first bucket of I'll call it very simple, basic process automation, where you're dealing with processes that are more structured, and the data itself is also more structured, and things that you're trying to automate are transactional and frankly mundane in nature. So RPA specifically is automating at that kind of user interface or desktop level, where you're essentially having a point and click type automation, kind of like an Excel spreadsheet macro would encompass. And then you kind of move up the stack and get into more enhanced automation, where you're introducing things like natural language processing or learning assist, and a use case that's typically in that kind of middle bracket or class is conversational intelligent chatbots, where you actually are using natural language processing to either interface with a customer or a citizen, or to understand sentiment and tone in an interaction. And then finally,
I was going to say in that second level, that would be when it begins to feel like AI, because it does respond to the individual and change as the conversation, quote unquote, proceeds.
Right, there's that human and machine partnership, if you will, where, I think I equate it to my kids trying to talk to things that shouldn't be talked to in the house, or trying to swipe their finger on the TV, right? It's another way for the human to interface with technology. And so you're right, exactly. Getting into natural language processing in that realm is definitely part of that AI, that true AI. And then finally, when you get into that more advanced realm, where you've got machine learning as well as the true artificial intelligence neural networks, where you're actually having the computer develop its own, I'll call it intelligence over time, whether it's through user interface training or through machine learning, where the machine is looking at data and updating its ability to provide increased confidence intervals and hypotheses. That's where you're actually getting into that augmented or artificial intelligence realm.
And I guess some of the use cases might be this whole digital services strategy that agencies are, at least in theory, under obligation to begin deploying. How can it work in a situation like that?
That's important. I think the administration has underscored the importance of artificial intelligence. Obviously, there's global pressures to make sure that we're keeping up. I think agencies are looking at proofs of concept and pilots right now in various use cases, from back office, middle, and front office, where it impacts the citizen. I think what's important is you really need to focus on, like you said, that digital strategy overall, to make sure the agency can understand how do you apply those different technology capabilities to the right use cases.
Yeah, so really this is a matter of not just simply the CIO office or the CISO office, but it sounds like a lot of people need to be involved in developing your agency use cases.
One of the things that we try to do is we'll get with an agency to do what we call opportunity assessment workshops. So we find that the best use cases are frankly from the folks in the field, on the ground, on the front lines, that are processing data, that are transacting agency business on a daily basis. And so through these workshops, we're able to determine an automation roadmap and apply that roadmap through selectivity criteria to a prioritized use case list and then we apply the right technologies to the right use cases.
Yeah, and what about user-centered design? Because that, from what you've been saying, that sounds like that fits in here somewhere.
It does, and I think as we've found, a lot of federal agencies are dealing with legacy IT, and so there are actually technologies out there that allow you to, instead of rip and replace these legacy IT concepts and infrastructures, but to actually overlay with a better user experience and a better UI to basically allow the employee or the citizen to have a better citizen interaction. And in many cases, you're using things like chatbots and natural language processing to have another aspect of interface between, again, that human and machine.
And when, continuing on that theme of deploying this externally for the citizen or some constituency-based type of application, how do you make sure that you are interacting in a way that will be meaningful to the larger community? Seems like you need to bring members of the public in almost to be able to be part of the experiment and part of the learning part of this.
That's a great point, and I think we kind of look at it in two ways. One, you want to involve the user as soon as you can up front, and a lot of times we'll do that in user acceptance testing or design thinking sessions that we have with certain folks that are going to be part of that population. But then we also have a concept called AI in control, where we have a framework and a methodology that basically instantiates things like reduction of bias, training bias in AI algorithms, the incorporation of security and controls into the process to make sure that, especially with citizen-facing interactions, you're controlling that interaction in a way that you can trust the AI and not just kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best.
Sure, so that means that within the agency's own data holdings, if you're going to interact meaningfully with people in an RPA setting, you've got to have some data about them.
Data is extremely critical, and the one nice thing about RPA is you're going to apply it to very structured data sets. So data prep on the Class 1 basic process automation is a little bit more straightforward. We're seeing use cases in the back office around automating, finance and HR processes. But as you get up into that more advanced analytics, predictive analytics, machine learning, data strategy and data prep is extremely important. You can't just dump data into a black box and expect that sausage to be made on the other side. You really have to have that data strategy in place.
And looking internally within the agency for users that are part of the federal employee workforce, what are some use cases for the internal look for RPA?
So I think, one of the things that we're seeing is, a lot of these federal employees and contractors and the like are just frustrated with doing these mundane tasks. And so, can we, instead of having someone literally turning pages 90 degrees on a PDF or pulling data from hundreds of public websites, why can't we automate that and then have that analyst focus on the results and the exceptions? And so a lot of the internal use cases are around enabling the workforce to be more cognitive and to be less transactional.
All right, let's take a break on that note. My guest today is Kirk Everson, Principal and Government Intelligence Automation Leader at KPMG. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin, on the discussion How Intelligent Automation and AI Are Transforming Government, sponsored by KPMG here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.